would maybe be interesting, Nick Reed, if you'd tell me what your grandfather's name was.
Well, his name technically was, his American name was William Strelzyk, but his Ukrainian name was Vladimir Strelzyk.
Okay, and you've already blown all the cover. We're talking about the Ukraine today,
Yeah.
And you're what, 2 generations removed
Yep.
from Ukraine?
Yes.
And if Putin has his way, there might be a lot of people removed from Ukraine.
Well, there are people fleeing Ukraine by the thousands right now.
Where are they going, Nick?
You know, that it varies. You know, a lot of them are flooding into Eastern Europe. Some of them are going south into some of the Baltic states. And I think a lot of them are just going any place they can.
Talk to our viewers about what your perspective is. You still have, I'm going to say, close ties to the Ukraine because you watch what's going on there. Do you have family there that you communicate with?
Not that I communicate with. It's been, I've tried to track people down in the Ukraine, but it's difficult because they weren't in they're no longer in the town where my grandfather came from.
Okay. Share with our viewers what your perspective is on what is Putin trying to do there?
Well, ultimately, Putin is trying to restore the Soviet Union, and the Ukraine is it. The Ukraine is really the first step, and it's probably the biggest piece that Putin needs. The Ukraine has always been called the breadbasket of Russia, because it's a large farming country, and most of the food, wheat, things like that come from the Ukraine, and so Russia desperately needs the Ukraine in order to survive. So if you want to rebuild a sprawling Soviet Union, that's a country you need.
Are you suggesting then that perhaps a Russia can't feed itself without the Ukraine?
Historically, that's always been the case.
Okay. So as you look at the landscape over there right now, what would your projection be? What's the likely outcome?
Boy, it's anybody's guess right now. There was an election a few months ago, and Petro Poroshenko became the president.
Yes, your guy Klitschko didn't quite cut the mustard there, but he's mayor,
yeah,
isn't he?
Klitschko got in early into the race. Poroshenko got in late, and my guess is they had a meeting of the minds. Klitschko said, well, Poroshenko's a billionaire. He's one of the richest people in the Ukraine. I think Klitschko realized not only could he probably not beat him, but Klitschko also saw an opportunity to get the job that he really wants and that he's always wanted, which is the mayor of Kiev. The mayor of Kiev in the Ukraine is sort of like being the vice president, except you have power.
Okay, so he's now the mayor.
Yep.
And how will that impact the landscape and the outcome in the Ukraine?
Well, the mayor of Kiev is in many ways like being the mayor of New York, in that you can influence so many things by being the head of the largest city in the country. That's really where the target is.
Well, what I've
Russia.
been told is that the city of New York has a law enforcement agency that is larger than all the rest of the country. Am I close?
I think that's true.
I'm looking to our producer, our executive news editor, and I see the bobbing going on. New York has a huge law enforcement arm, so I would imagine. So
Kiev is very similar that way. Most of the troops that have been moved to the Eastern Front, so to speak, have been out of Kiev. That's where most of the things happen. That's certainly where all of the political decisions are all made in
I
Kiev.
would guess that Klitschko might have a different perspective on gun ownership from Bloomberg. I don't know.
I would think so. I think he probably has a pretty different perspective from Bloomberg on most things.
It might be a gun for everyone.
I would agree with that. And that is really what it's been out there. It truly is a militia in the truest sense of the word. That I mean, people are stepping off of their jobs and grabbing guns and running to the front.
Did I hear that it's very likely the tanks are going to start rolling again?
They absolutely are. Poroshenko, the new president, came to a tentative ceasefire with the eastern part of the nation, really through Putin, who is probably reloading. And he announced yesterday, actually, Poroshenko did, that the ceasefire was off and they were going to begin to push into eastern Ukraine. Really what has happened is the Russian-sponsored militias, highly trained, which is unusual unless you realize that the Russians are the ones who trained them, have begun taking over cities in the eastern part of the Ukraine and taking over businesses and completely tearing down the infrastructure in eastern Ukraine. And a guy like Poroshenko, who is, first of all, a capitalist, a business owner, and a political mind, understands what's happening there, and I think he's had enough. So we now enter the phase into where the Ukraine begins to push back, and we see how Putin responds.
The question might be not has he had enough, but does he have enough?
That's truly it.
To stop Putin from advancing. I guess we'll have to wait and see.